Hello all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing The Bear Season 3, and today we're on episode 5, titled Children. If you haven't watched it yet, this is our spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. Okay, let's dive in with the episode summary for this episode. Sarah, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. The computer gives the bear its odds.
That must have been great having anyone who's read that summary before watching the episode and just being like, the computer. Because it's a capital C computer.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start off with our episode titles for episode 5. What is yours, Sarah?
Mine is Iridescent.
Nice. I love it. Password accepted.
Yes.
My episode title is Go Grab a Duck.
Oh my gosh, that moment. Oh, wow.
The real response is freshwater, or what are we thinking?
And just Sydney's face of like, no.
Okay, let's dive in with our thoughts about episode 5. We are at the halfway mark, Sarah. What thoughts? Does it feel like it? What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just kind of thinking about the season as a whole, because in some ways we're not really working toward a goal. Mm-hmm. You know, in the previous season, the goal was opening the restaurant and friends and family, and like everybody was united behind this goal. And in this season, there really isn't that. It's just kind of like, do the restaurant, go after a star, maybe, but there's not like clear like steps for how to get there. And then we know just all of the interpersonal things that are going on between all of the characters. So it's just kind of interesting. It doesn't feel like we've made progress toward a goal because we don't know what the goal is. And so it's just interesting being at the halfway point and you're like, I don't really know where we're at or like what we're doing, or are we making good progress? But this episode is very fun. There's a lot of ups and downs in this. There's some really like heartfelt moments, like with Sid and Marcus, and they're talking about the Dead Mom Club. Yeah. You know, then there's these silly moments with all the facts and all of the chaos that they bring into our lives. And then you have these stressful moments of the photographer is there and he's shooting the place settings, that he wants to shoot the meal, but they don't know what meal was served because of this chaos menu. So I love how all of these things really coexist in this episode, and you go on a roller coaster of emotions, but in a really good way. And you get to see, you know, more of those threads that we talked about in the last episode continue to develop, and some of those questions that we had about Sugar and her role in the business and her about to go give birth. We get to see more of Richie and Carmi and their feud, and even though they're both grieving, you know, the closing of Chef Terry's restaurant, they can't talk about it because of their feud. So all of these little things that have been teased up this episode continues to seed those things for us to wonder what is going to happen next. So I think all in all, it's an effective episode. I'm still just a little unclear where we're going in this season, which I don't know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just like, what are we working towards? Where are we going? And I'm not sure.
Yeah. And it felt like the end of the previous episode felt like, okay, this is the forward momentum around this review and preparing this restaurant for the photographers. But the photographer shows up in this episode, so you're like, oh, okay. What is that next thing? I think this episode's a lot of fun. I think just spending time with these characters and seeing them interact with each other, and I think there's more unique pairings of people that we get in this episode that we don't often see together. So we get to see Marcus and Sugar have a really meaningful conversation. We get to see Sid and Uncle Jimmy have a really meaningful conversation. So there's these new pairings that I think has uncovered new aspects for each of the characters. I think overall within the 5 episodes so far, this episode's probably the weakest if I had to rank them. There's a lot happening, and perhaps it's set up and context for what's to come in the second half of the season. But there was less of a cohesion, I think, with all of the parts here. I mean, it's still the bear, it's still awesome, and there's some really great character moments. But I would say compared to some of those previous episodes that we've seen so far, I felt like those were a lot stronger with a clear sense of framing and a cohesiveness to the episode. There's some really interesting like industry dynamics and larger, if we zoom out upon this city, there's some dynamics that I think are revealed here around the farmers market with Tina, and then with Chef Terry, that I also think is going to be fascinating. I feel like sometimes the bear includes those as kind of backdrop for like a sense of place and commentary on the industry in general. But oftentimes these things might fuel stressors or moments later on. So I feel like there's maybe something that they're brewing there with all of those aspects and details.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to look forward to. And like you said, the show keeps giving us these little pieces of information that we can just kind of keep in our back pocket and know that this is going to come up again later. And I think especially the farmers market is so prominent so far in this season that I'm curious to see how that comes up again, especially because in that first episode, in one of Carmi's flashbacks, he was working in a restaurant that was also some sort of like garden or something, and they would like pick their own produce, it seemed like. So I think that's a very interesting kind of through line in this season, and I wonder how that will continue to grow and what the show is going to do with it.
Yep. And it seems to be a thread line that they're continuing to pull episode to episode. So, in the previous episode, we got to see Tina go to the farmer's market and have that whole conversation with one of the local growers talking, I think it was like the garlic, talking about how the growing season is shorter, and there's kind of this insinuation of climate change really changing the landscape for these farmers and what they're able to output and produce. So there's definitely like dedicated like screen time to this theme that continues to be revisited episode to episode. So yeah, there's got to be something there that's potentially cooking. We trust and know, because we've gone through 2 seasons of The Bear so far, that all of these details are not just accidental, fodder for the landscape and the backdrop. No, there's often something that it's going to be building towards, or these details will play a key role in some way.
And I'm curious about that phrase, whatever grows together goes together. They've said that a couple times in this season, and I keep wondering if that's obvious, like that connects to food and all of that. But I also wonder if maybe in some ways that's also a metaphor of all of these people as they're growing together in their leadership, as they're growing this business together. Like, are they going to be able to go together for the long run as they grow together? Because I feel like in some ways, like Richie and Sydney and Tina and Sugar, like they've all really like grown over the last season, especially during that Friends and Family. And Carmi went in the other direction. And so I do wonder if that phrase is also a metaphor for some of the like relational dynamics happening within the bear. I don't know.
That's so good. We'll that is so good. I hadn't thought about it in that way. So look at you with those metaphors. Love it.
I'm trying to get better at metaphors.
It's great. I think it's a fabulous point. And I mean, there's obviously this team that has grown together, but I think especially with the introduction of Sammy Fack as well, there's also just so much history for this family and all of the backdrop of their childhood together that I think is also very interesting. And you see the way that those play out in the relational dynamics as well.
Hmm. Yeah, Sammy just comes right in and is he brings a lot to this
I
episode.
know.
It's an experience.
Yeah, the understatement of the century. He brings so much, and it's fascinating because I feel like at the previous episode, in episode 4, we got to see Neil and Ted just banter back and forth together, and it was like, oh my gosh, I would love to see more of this Fax duo, please. But little did I know, what I really wanted was to see the Fax trio and have a whole nother factor into the mix that just brings an extra bit of pizzazz to the group.
What I I need to I didn't do my full research on this, but from my hazy recollection about the facts, in the first season, we got a little bit of Neil, but I don't know that we saw any other facts. And then in the second season, it was mostly Neil with a little bit of Theo, but not a lot. And then I feel like this season, the third season, we get a lot of Neil, we get a good amount of Theo, and now we have a third fac introduced in the third season. And so I'm curious, are we going to wait until the fourth season to introduce a fourth fac?
Yeah.
Or is it going to start like increasing exponentially the number of facts that are introduced into our lives? So I thought it was just funny. Like, now we know 3 facts on the third season. Will the pattern hold going forward?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting too because they continually reference the fourth one. Francie, I think is her name.
Francie,
Francine.
yes, that
Yep.
Sugar hates.
Yep.
Yes.
So that's going to be great drama. More relational history there and dramatic, tensions between them. And I'm sure she's a big personality as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they all are. It's a
Yes.
lot. I was like, okay,
It
3 facts is too many facts for me. It's too much.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, some of the big moments that really stood out to you. Let's dive into some of those.
Yeah, we get a really good moment between Sydney and Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet, heartwarming, very like somber, obviously, as he's dealing with, what to do with his mom's stuff. And it's just so humorous and easy, and their banter is so good. And so it's just nice to see those two in a good place, because I feel like for a lot of the season, we haven't seen them interacting. And
Yeah.
so, the last time we kind of saw them together was the previous season where Marcus tried to shoot a shot and then it was really awkward and then chaos ensued. So it was just nice to see those two being able to connect again and see their friendship continuing forward
Yeah.
even amidst all of the craziness of the kitchen.
Yes, I was so pleased by that. I was afraid and worried that like that little moment at the end of the finale of season 2 would have just like changed the dynamic because that often happens. And also, I think it's like shows, TV, movies love to do that whole thing of like they were friends and then one of them shot their shot and then now it's really weird because it's dramatic, it's fun, there's tension, easy fun stuff to put on the big screen. And I just appreciate that the show loves these two enough as people, and their connection as people is so strong that their friendship can continue on. And I really feel like you get to see that it is settled and it is peaceful again between the two of them, and it's not weird, and they still support each other, are rooting for each other, are there for each other in all of the ways that made their friendship so meaningful. And you get to see that in that opening scene in this episode. And then their whole little banner about the Dead Moms Club I thought was just really great. And also something that we've seen a ton of times on The Bear that The Bear does so well, which is like, we're going to take a really meaningful conversation that is serious and good and it's deep, but we need to figure out how to come out of it at the end. And sometimes you just need to joke about some things that are really hard. And that's how you like can build trust and know that like, okay, like we get each other, we understand this is a hard topic, and we're gonna figure out how to talk about it. Like we're still talking about it. We're just gonna have a little fun with it too, because life can be overwhelming when it's serious all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that conversation is so fun, and what a great way to kind of open the episode too. Like it happens pretty early on to kind of set the stage for what everybody's going through, and I don't know how they're continuing to connect with each other even in the crazy times.
Yep. Yep. So true. So true. Um, One of the moments that I loved, which I feel like we've gotten to see moments of this in the past previous episodes as well, but Sid's leadership. So the moment that I really love is the way that she shows Tina a different way to use that green sauce. You know, we see initially Tina like just drizzle it on top of the cauliflower and the Brussels sprouts, and instead of criticizing and making Tina feel bad about it, or being really aggressive about it, Sid just says, "Hey, can I show you something different in how we can do this?" And it's so kind, and it's able to show a better way, a better methodology without being exacting and um, um, you know, really like making Tina feel bad about doing it wrong. She, instead of saying you did it wrong, it's like, no, let's focus on the better way that we could do this. And I just love the gentleness, the tenderness, and the way that Sydney leads. And I think we've gotten to see that a lot throughout the season already. And we just get to see little moments of that each episode, which I really appreciate.
And I loved that moment because Tina is trying to do something different and she's trying to do something new, and Sydney encourages that kind of creativity and exploration. And I really appreciate that Tina's whole goal essentially was to create this beautiful dish that also supports these local farmers that she's been able to build relationship with over the past
Mm-hmm.
however long they've been doing this. And so I think that that's such a sweet insight into who Tina is as well, and uh, seeing kind of maybe some of those things that motivate her and how she wants to also take care of the people that she cares about, and what is important to her. And then Sydney is able to recognize that and encourage that more.
Yeah, no, it's so good. It's so good. And we get to see, we understand that because we got to see in the previous episode Tina having conversation with her local vendors, and that, like, she is the perfect person for this because she's so relational. She's very similar to Richie in that way. And so you get to see that she's building that rapport and that connection with these farmers when she's there. Like they seem to know her. She's been there a million times, and there's a warmth in those interactions. And it's a very short, brief scene in the previous episodes that I feel like continues to pay off. So again, the bear with the details of what they show us, it all matters. It all is going to amount to something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to pay attention to every little thing because it all
Yep.
comes back around.
Yep. 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 Um, One of the moments that I really loved in this episode is Uncle Jimmy talking to Sid about just reflecting on what his role was in um, these kids' childhoods. And he's basically observing that Carmi's incredibly high strung. And, you know, he just wishes that Carmi could just relax a little bit and not put so much pressure on himself. And he is self reflective enough to think about what his part was. Cause I think it's easy to maybe just focus on seeing the people around you, and even that is great. Good job, Uncle Jimmy. But then his ability to, you know, look at himself and reflect on what his role was in that as one of the you know, adult figures in the lives of these kids, and just wondering if he could have done better. And I love how kind and thoughtful Sydney is to just say, you're doing a lot now. And Uncle Jimmy doesn't really get it at first, and she says, you're here. And so there's this emphasis I think that the show has on just showing up for the people in your lives is half the battle. It's so meaningful to just be there. And there's it's very like resonant of what Marcus shares with Sydney in the opening of the episode, where he talks about how his dad wasn't in the picture, but his mom was always there and always faithfully there. And so just seeing how much the adults just being there, and even the team just being there for each other, means a lot. And that goes a long way to just show up for the people that you care about.
Well, and it's so cool to see Sydney, who is considerably younger than Uncle Jimmy, being able to recognize that in him and encourage him in that, even though he is older, he is financing this whole thing. Even though she still hasn't signed the partnership agreement, and they talk about that, she doesn't allow any of that stuff to hinder her from that piece of encouragement and sharing that with him when he needs it.
Yeah, it was so good. I was honestly kind of surprised at how much Uncle Jimmy was opening up to her. I think it's fascinating to see how much Sydney has just built so much trust with like every character on the show, basically. You know what I mean? It's such a testament to who she is as a person that they feel comfortable and safe enough to share and open up and be vulnerable with her. It's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, is just like how these environments of safety really help people share their hard parts and be vulnerable and bare their soul. And I feel like you get to see how much Sydney is a safe haven for nearly every character on the show. And it's indicative in the way that they feel comfortable enough to share with her.
And I think that also ties into something that we've talked about a little bit, especially this season, is what is Sydney going to do with all of that, though? Like, it's great to be the person that people can go to, but who can you go to?
Yep.
And in that conversation with Marcus, she talks about how it can be scary to have to rely on somebody, and she relies on her dad. And so I'm curious to see if the show is going to continue to show us more of Sydney's relationship with her dad, and how she can maybe also use him as a safe space when everything and the bear gets way too overwhelming for her.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, no, that's so true. It's so true. And it was interesting because when Uncle Jimmy walks away from that conversation, there's this shot that lingers on Sydney's face where it almost looks like she's breathing like heavily and a little bit out of breath and overwhelmed and stressed, and then she calms herself down. But it was like, oh no, like I think it's something we talked about in the previous episode when we were reviewing it, but just there's so much that Sydney's carrying the weight of the stress of the restaurant and running the restaurant, but then also, being that safe haven for a lot of people. And like you were saying, where does she have to release and share and feel seen? Who is that for her? Where is that place for her? And is she taking care of herself? And I think that the show continues to give us little signs that like, something's brewing there, and we just want to see her emotionally healthy and grounded as well. And I feel like she's pouring out so much right now, and man, something's gonna have to give soon.
And the other thing that I was thinking about while watching is in the conversation that Richie has with Jess, who had worked with Chef Terry. She says that Terry just didn't want to do it anymore. And I keep wondering that about Sydney. Like, when is she going to reach the point where she just doesn't want to do it anymore? Because I can see, like, Carmi almost needs this. And, like, I think in a way, like, Sydney does too, but it's different. And so I could see Sydney following a similar path and saying, you know what? It's just not worth it anymore. I'm done. And I'm walking away. And so I'm curious. That line in particular is making me curious if we will see that in Sydney at some point in time, or if that's just a line about Terry. Like, I don't know. We'll see if that's foreshadowing something more maybe in the future.
Yeah. And that's the thing with burnout too. It's like because there weren't those places to release the pressure, almost like opening up the pressure valves and just being able to unwind well and have that like emotional healthiness around how we're handling and managing stress. Without that, it's easy for us to swing to the other side, and just the pendulum breaks, the rubber band snaps, the pendulum swings to the other side, and then we can't do it anymore. And so I feel like that is going to be fascinating to see with Sydney. How does she take care of herself well so that she can go the long distance on it, instead of, you know, giving, and then, we just collapse and die.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we don't want that to happen. We
No.
believe in Chef Sydney. We want good things for her.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Okay. Other big moments that happened in this episode.
I have a positive thing to say about Carmi.
Yeah, there we go.
I've had spicy feelings about him so far this season. I still have spicy feelings about him, but he has realized that Ibra needs
Yeah.
help. And so he made sure to talk to Sugar so that they could hire. Number one, okay, Carmi identified an issue outside of him and an issue for another employee. That's great. He was able to look outside of himself. Number two, he recognizes that there is an answer to this, and he doesn't do it unilaterally, but he talks to Sugar about a money and staffing issue. Again, huge. I was so proud of him. I was like, this is great. Way to recognize these things, way to lead instead of just focusing on the parts that you are good at. Thank you for looking out for your team. Thank you for looking out for Ibra, who is one of our faves. It was great. Good job, Carmi. We're proud of you.
Yeah, that was really great. And it's interesting because in the first interaction between him and Ibra, he kind of still makes it about himself, like he's like, am I effing this up? And I was like, oh my gosh, Carmi, even in this moment, this was about you. And you see Ibra respond like, no, I'm so sorry, it's my fault. And I'm like, no, it's not. And then while I'm still pissed about that, and then in a later scene, like a few scenes later, we get to see him have the conversation with Sugar. So we're like, okay, great, this is really good. He noticed. And I love that the show kind of plays with our expectations a little bit too, and gets us riled up about it, only to then diffuse it for us. And I thought that was some really great writing, because he could have just, in that conversation be like, hey, this seems like let's check in now, and he doesn't. He kind of reveals that later on in a different scene.
Yeah, so there's a little self-awareness there, there's a little glimmer of growth. We'll take it.
Yep. Good job. Good job. Okay. I just have a little shout out for the scenes watching Marcus at work on the violet dish. It's great because, well, one, just watching Marcus work in general is like really soothing. I'm like, man, when I have a stressful day, let me just put on a 12-hour loop of montage of Marcus at work. He's just so focused, but it's not this frenetic, chaotic, anxiety-inducing sense of focus that we feel when we watch Carmi work. There's a sense of peace and a steadiness in the way that he's progressing and trying things, but it's not this anxious striving, which I think is really, really awesome. And we got to see that in the very beginning of the show. I think it might have been seasons 1 or 2, where he's working on his donuts, and we get those moments of respite in this chaotic kitchen of watching him, faithfully at work on his project. But I think what makes those scenes extra sweet is because they come after the whole conversation that Marcus has with Sugar about his mom loving Violet, and him being inspired by the Violet that we saw in the previous episode, and then him working on this like purple gel jelly or whatever they call it, and this care and attention that he's putting into this feels extra meaningful because we know it's coming out of this place of honoring his mom and out of this place of love. So I loved that little segment that we get in this episode with Marcus.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Just more Marcus cooking scenes, please. The bear, give it to us. This is what we want, because he is such a almost like a respite from
Yeah.
all of the chaos in the kitchen. Like he is a safe space from Carmi's chaos or Richie's chaos, you know? And so it's so wonderful to have those just brief moments where we can see his creativity shine. And I am so curious. I want to know what he's going to create with this purple jelly stuff and whatever kind of like white, I don't bake.
Like
I don't know what
meringue or
things are.
something.
Meringues. Yeah.
I don't
I'm
know.
so curious. I'm like, I cannot wait for that reveal.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be really fun. And just there's so much meaning behind it. It's something that they think the show consistently does is showcasing how these dishes, these creations are born out of something personal. You know, like it in Friends and Family Night in the whole previous season, one of the dishes is called Seven Fishes, you know, and you see the way where that comes from and all of that kind of stuff. And it's kind of this inspired dish with all different types of seafood on the plate that's very beautifully and elegantly plated, but it's rooted in this family tradition. And I feel like you get to see more of that in this season as well, of Marcus's creation being born out of this place of personal connection to people that he loves or memories that he loves or things that he cares about. So I love the way that the show showcases the culinary art is truly also personal and born out of these personal experiences.
Yeah, you can't separate the people from what they're creating, and
Yep.
I do appreciate we see that with Carmi and the way that he is created. We see that with Sydney and her kind of dreaming up recipes in the previous season, and we've also
Mm-hmm.
seen that from Marcus, and so it's cool to see even the differences between those three and the things that they draw upon to create. But it's all that personal stuff that they bring to their food. And I mean, that's what makes food good is when you cook from the heart. And that's clearly what Marcus is doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That's so good. I'm curious your thoughts on the way that this episode ends with Carmi discovering this box in the basement of old pictures of him with his mom. And I'm curious your thoughts on like what that means, where that's potentially heading us to, as we know that the looming like Sugar needs to go talk to Donna. Is Donna going to show up at the restaurant? There's a line from a previous episode. I forget who says it, but they said like it's better if you find Dee Dee and before Dee Dee finds you, you know. And so there's this kind of looming thread line for this narrative arc around this family. And so I'm curious your thoughts on the episode choosing to end with that shot. It just I felt like that was so intentional and perhaps giving us a hint into what's to come.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially because the episode, it doesn't open with it, but early in the episode we get that conversation with Marcus and Sid and members of the Dead Moms Club, and then we see Sugar avoiding a call from Donna, and then we see Carmi finding her stuff. So there's this interesting thread about moms and these characters' relationship with their moms that I find really interesting. And it's kind of this contemplative thread that goes throughout this entire episode, and we see how different characters are reflecting on their childhoods or their relationships with their mom and how each one responds very differently. So I thought it was an interesting way to end this episode, especially because it was so like stressful and silly in the middle of it, and then we end on this kind of reflective note of Carmi looking back on these pictures. So that just, it makes me curious to see what's going to happen next, especially because the previous episode ended with, you know, about the review and they're coming to take pictures and this like hard rock, like, yeah, let's watch another episode. And then episode 5 ends and you're just like, okay, we're back in reflection mode. This is interesting. So I'm curious to see what comes next, just because this ends that way rather than with this like momentum, let's watch the next episode. It kind of ends with a like, let's pause and reflect and think before we do something else. So that's just, I don't know, it's just interesting. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I'm excited to see how it fits within the larger scope of the season.
Yeah, no, those are some really interesting thoughts, especially around this larger theme around these different characters reflecting on the role of their parents in their lives, and there's just so many different connection points. There's also just the whole thing with Sugar and her mom, and the inevitability of that, and all of these aspects. I think the other factor that is like a big question mark for me, and what keeps me wanting and curious to see what happens in the next episode, is like waiting to see what it is that will get Carmy to snap out of this like trance that he's in, where he's so fixated on striving to make this restaurant great. Like he's kind of just, in this frenetic, headspace, and everyone I think is waiting to figure out like how do we get Carmy to just like stop for a hot second, just, rest and come to his senses. And he even says in this episode, he's like, I feel kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch. And so there's this sense of like constant striving, but the awareness and groundedness that he feels within himself, I feel like is missing. And I think I'm waiting and curious to see what it is that will help him snap out of that and to come to his senses, to realize the state that he's been in, and to feel like a whole human person again, and acknowledge his feelings and reconcile his relationship with Claire. Like there's just so much, I think, waiting for him on the other side. And I don't know what it is that will be, but maybe it's something, again, with the people that he cares about, this family dynamic, all of that. They're like, what will it be that will get him to snap out of it? I think is an open question. And he has such an interesting facial expression when he's looking at those photos too, that I'm curious to see. I'm sure at the start of the next episode, we'll get to see what does he feel? What is he thinking? I just want to know,
Yes, come on, Carmy. there is more for you than just being a workaholic recipe monster. Like we can do more. You can be a fully formed human with relationships and joy. Listen to Richie. We can have joy. So hopefully we'll see some of that growth from him in the remaining 5 episodes of this season.
Are there any other big things that we wanted to mention before we give out some awards?
I do want to give a shout out. It's not a big thing. It's a little tiny thing. But in one of the scenes where I think Neil is talking to Theo, he's drinking a Capri Sun. Yes. And I just respect that. I'm like, Neil, where'd you get a Capri Sun in this like fancy fine dining restaurant? So I thought that was so funny and so fitting for who he is as a character. I loved it. And then I do have a question, because Richie refers to Neil as Neil Jeff. And I think at one point they said either Theodore Jeff or Sammy Jeff. I don't remember which one. And so do all of the facts have Jeff as their middle name? Is that what's happening here?
No.
I have questions.
Yeah. I thought it was because they, they have that running joke of calling each other Jeff instead of Chef. But I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so it Jeff instead of Chef moved from Tina to everyone else also.
That was my guess.
Joke.
That was my guess.
That's a more logical guess, but it's just like, I don't know what the facts, You
never know.
I'm not sure. Okay. Got it.
No, I have no idea. I love that little bit where I think it's Theo that stole the SD cards, and the three of them are already so chaotic, but then you throw Richie in the mix and he's like, oh, okay, so like Megs or gigs? And they're like, gigs. And Richie's like, immediately, like, nope, you're an asshole. Haunt his ass. It's just, you can tell that they have grown up with each other, and just the shenanigans just immediately ensue when they're together.
But I love that Sammy is immediately with the like yes chef thing and like responding that way and referring to other people as chef. Even the computer does it too. And so it's so interesting to me to think about how that has like infected all of their relationships. And so
Mm-hmm.
everybody who is connected to anyone working at the Bear is probably calling everybody chef all the time. And
Yep.
that's just so
Even
funny to
Sydney's
me.
dad.
Yes. It's
Even
so
Sydney's dad
good.
calls her chef. It's really sweet.
Yeah. Everyone is chef.
Yep. I want to give a shout out to the whole bit that the computer and Uncle Jimmy have about the charger plates because it is such a ridiculous concept when you try and think about it and explain it to someone. And I love that they in the world of fine dining, they're just like, nope, get rid of it. That doesn't make any sense. Like, why is there an extra plate that just sits there that does not hold food? No one eats off of it, but we need to wash it. Like, hell no. It is like a ridiculous decorative thing that adds to, the experience of a nice dining experience. But on paper, you're just like, this actually is really weird. Why do we do this as humans?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's helpful to examine those things, and I did love that conversation that they were having, and it's interesting to see where the chefs and Sugar are drawing those lines of like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, we can get rid of this thing, like whatever, we can pare down on the microgreens, but I'm unwilling to give up these other things because these are vitally important. So
Yep.
it's interesting to maybe see their priorities come out. And I mean, obviously, their financial situation isn't going to drastically change. So I imagine over the next few episodes, they're going to continue to have to figure out those priorities so that they can maybe get into the black instead of being in the red.
Yep. Yep. No, it's so true. It's so true. I love that there's a really great moment that we get with Sugar as well when the computer comes and says, like, hey, your pastry chef, one, do we need him? Okay, we need him. Can we do a cheaper one? And you just get to see Sugar launch into Mama Bear mode, and it's really, really great and really sweet. She's like, if you ever suggest us cut Marcus, I'm going to come for you. I'm going to kill you.
As she should. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, there would be a whole line of us who are right there with her because Marcus is the best.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody mess with Marcus.
Yep. 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 All right. Well, let's give out some awards, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay. First category is for Top Chef. Who's getting this award?
I want to give it to Tina. She's had a few rough moments, especially in episode 3. She was really struggling to keep up, but that has not dissuaded her. And instead, she is coming up with a new dish to, showcase these local ingredients from these local farmers. And so I think that is worth celebrating.
I love it. I love it. Yes. Go Tina. We've really seen her evolve and grow so much over the past couple of seasons. And even when things were tough and she was really hard on herself, as we saw in the Doors episode, she's bouncing back. She's doing her thing. She's sticking with it and not running. So I love it. I am giving this award to Uncle Jimmy just for him observing and noticing the Carmy's, very high strung, but also his willingness to examine himself and his role in it. I think that's just really awesome. And sometimes, especially in these like relationships with your family that have been so ingrained for so long, it's maybe hard to really look at yourself clearly and see what your place was in it. And I just love that he's willing to do that. It's not always easy to do, to assess what your role in something was, but he chooses to. And I love that.
Yes, we love it. We love that, Uncle Jimmy.
It's just surprising. Yeah. Nothing like he's such a confident dude who like comes in and sure of himself and seems very set in his ways and whatnot. And so it was a surprising moment of his self-awareness and willingness to reflect that I was pleasantly surprised by.
Yeah, we want to celebrate that.
Yep. Okay. Achievement in Chaos. What's getting this award for this episode?
Yeah, I think I want to give this to the three facts being in the restaurant at one time. I think that is the most chaotic thing possible. We've seen two facts is fine. Three is possibly too many in the restaurant all at one time.
I have the same one for this week. I wrote down facts attack. Their little like handshake bit that they do too is so cute. It's so adorable. Okay, the next category is spiciest line. Who is getting this award for what moment?
Yeah, I want to give it to Sugar for when she defends Marcus and says, "If you F with Marcus, I will murder you."
So good. So good. I love that moment. It's like a close up of her face too, and you just see the passion in her eyes. It's awesome. Okay, I am giving this award to Uncle Jimmy for pushing his glasses up with his middle finger at Carmi.
Yes. Oh, I loved that moment. It was so good.
I bust out laughing. It was so great. Okay, looking ahead, we are at the halfway point. So, what are you hoping to see in the next episode or, really in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much like everything that we talked about last time.
Yep.
I'm curious about Sugar and her impending giving birth, and what that will do with the restaurant, her relationship with Donna. I'm curious for when Donna appears. What does that look like? And I really want to see Marcus's dessert that he's making. And then the new bit of information we got in this episode, I'm very curious about the funeral dinner that they're gonna have. I hope that we get to see that, and I'm curious what that would be like, having all of these people who have been influenced by Chef Terry all in one place. What would that dinner be like? So I'm curious about that too.
So good. Yeah. Honestly, it's so funny in this looking ahead section. There's so much that is the same episode to episode, which is just like, I think, a testament to the storytelling capabilities of the show to keep us satisfied and satiated with each episode. And yet we still have some of the big open questions and we are maybe progressing forward on them, but the resolution hasn't come yet. And I think like so much of writing TV and writing films as well is like pushing off that resolution for as long as possible to create more and more tension and build up for it while not feeling like we're just stalling. And I'm amazed at the show's ability to tell us so much, and I feel satisfied after every episode. And yet I think about it, I'm like, nothing got resolved that I was waiting for yet. So I guess I'm just gonna have to keep going for the next episode. So my big three things are seeing the inevitability of the conversation / interactions with Donna for this whole crew, potentially with Carmi as well in there, not just Sugar going to see her. Carmi and Claire, looming bit for the whole show so far for this season. And then Sid partnership agreement. I think those three big things I feel like are inevitable, and the show is consistently teased again and again and again. So we know we're going to get that stuff, but how will it all unfold? I think each of these three things could go both directions. It could be really great. It could also be really disastrous. And I feel like that will be really fun to see how those get resolved. And the show is very intentionally teasing that thread line.
Yeah, we got to keep watching. We got to see what happens, because so many things can and will happen before the end of the season.
Yep. We still got a whole second half. I'm excited. All right. Well, this is our review and discussion of episode 5. You can find it available to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 3. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about episode 5. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at TBNSPod, or email us at tbnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon to continue our journey through this season with episode 6 right around the corner. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.